Well, hello everyone, Philip Hill from Landmark here. Today I'm going to talk about mining and substance risks in conveyancing, but before I do, a huge thank you to Searches UK. If you don't already use them for your conveyancing searches, please give them a go. They have a nationwide presence. They're extremely capable, extremely professional. And the only other thing to mention today is the time. So this should last 45, 50 minutes, something like that. I think I've got a reference you can use as a continuing competency reference in your SRA logs, excuse me, on the last slide. So without further ado, I'll make a start. So what are we going to talk about today? Here we go. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about subsidence, how it's caused. We can talk about the triggers of subsidence, some things that look like subsidence that aren't. Subsidence in the UK, lender and insurance approach to subsidence, subsidence claims, a couple of case studies, and we'll have a look lastly at the landmark of mining and substance, second to last, mining and substance report, and lastly, something that I call simplifying your search pack. So I'm gonna keep you in suspense because I haven't really explained what that is. So before I talk about subsidence and how it's caused, which is the first one, I'm just going to, now this is being recorded, I'd normally ask a few questions and you get a few answers in, but because I think at face value, subsidence is not that, what's the way to put it, not a dynamic subject for conveyancers, but it's really, really important. So I'm going to ask I'm going to ask and answer a few questions to frame that. So in an average year, how many UK properties are affected by flooding? So I know I'm talking about subsidence, so how many properties are affected by flooding? The answer is about, according to the Association of British Insurers, 20,000. So there might be more that are affected by flooding, but these ones are affected by flooding and they've made a claim to UK insurers. So 20,000 insurance claims in the UK in an average year. Now, how many subsidence claims are made against insurers in an average year? The answer is 20 to 25,000 pounds. 20 to 25,000 in an average year. How many properties in the UK are at risk of subsidence? Well, the answer is about 6.9 million, 1 in 5. Again, around the same as those liable to flood risk. And the number of properties affected by subsidence in 2003, after a long dry summer, was 55,000. That's 55 insurance claims for subsidence. And the number of properties affected by flooding in 2007, according to the 2008 Sir Michael Pitt report, was 57,000 in the UK. So the reason I've mentioned those is that there's two main points to consider. Subsidence is as much a threat as flooding in the UK, but flooding is just more newsworthy than subsidence. You know, it's more, you know, so years ago you'd have said it sells more copy. It's just more exciting to look at, you know, a video of sort of flash flooding pouring down the street than it is to see a house where subsidence is causing, you know, a gap in a wall to get bigger by 1/10 of a millimeter, you know, a day, week, month. You know, it's just not very exciting. It's the short answer, but it's very, very important to UK properties. So what is subsidence? Well, everything's affected by gravity. The official definition is shown on the slide. Quote, vertical downward movement due to a loss of support from volumetric changes in subsoil, end quote. In other words, a void is created by changes in the soil and the building drops into it. So it's pretty simple. Now this contrasts with settlement, where the weight of the building pushes down to the soil, compressing it, which causes instability and minor cracking. Now this is a natural occurrence during the lifetime of a building, particularly in its early years. And it's useful to know that settlement is not covered by insurance. And signs of possible subsidence include vertical and diagonal cracking, cracking through the damp-proof course into the foundations, matching external and internal cracking, cracks that open and close with the seasons, opening in the spring and summer as it gets warmer, and closing in the autumn and winter. Excuse me. cracks that open after a long dry period, and also doors and windows that stick. Now, sometimes the reason for this is that doors and windows were designed as part of the structural integrity of the property, but they're ironically some of the weakest parts of the property. So you'll typically get that in older properties. So how is subsidence caused? Well, this slide sets out the core causes and triggers, which are examined in more details in a minute. The core causes are soil shrinkage, so clay and silt, running, natural water. It could be running man-made water as well, but I'll talk about that in a second. Fine particles and soluble rock, man-made, could be mining. Infill sites, vibrations such as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. And the key triggers to this are trees and vegetation, which is the main one, leaking drains and leaking water mains. So that comes into the man-made running water and man-made triggers. So 75% of all subsidence claims in the UK are caused by soil shrinkage. Leaking drains cause about 15 to 20% of UK subsidence claims. There you go. Soil shrinkage is the predominant cause of subsidence in the UK. 75% soils are either cohesive or non-cohesive, but both will contain water. So cohesive soil will absorb or push out water depending on the water content surrounding it. For instance, soil and clay soils, which will expand and contract during the season depending on the amount of rainfall or lack of it, and in particular the amount of moisture sucked out by trees and other plant life. And non-cohesive soils, e.g. sandy soils, where changes in the water levels can wash the soil away or liquefy, causing it to give way under the weight of the building, pressing down on it. So that's cohesive and non-cohesive. And the other one, well, the other two less common soil problems are decomposition, i.e. organic soils, for instance, peat. If the water table drops, air can get at the peat. This will decompose over time, causing voids to occur. So when building in peat areas, not that common in the UK, raft foundations, so a larger area, would normally be used. And the other one is dissolve. So chalk and limestone, this can erode over time and create sudden sinkholes. We see them. Well, we used to see them mostly in Florida on the news, you know, where part of a house or a house disappears into the ground. This wasn't as common in the UK. It used to be found in the Chilterns, where most of the soil is, or a lot of the soil is chalk and limestone, but we seem to be having more and more of these sinkholes, you know, which dramatically open up. And I've got a couple of case studies of ones where it's happened in the UK in 5 or 10 minutes. So there are some triggers that cause subsidence, and the first one are trees and vegetation. So the most common cause of subsidence is water being extracted by trees and other vegetation. It makes up over 60% of claims each year. Key points to emphasize are that a mature deciduous tree, so one that sheds its leaves every year, can remove up to 50,000 litres of moisture per year. Moisture can be extracted down to a depth of up to 6 metres. Most modern foundations are about 1.8 metres deep. We had some extensions done to our property which finished last year, and all the extensions, all the single story, or the foundations that were going to have single story were 900 mil, or just below a metre, and the ones at the back which were going to have a bit more weight on were 1.8 metres. So obviously if it's going to be above 2 stories residential, or depending on the geology, so if it's a high-rise building, then obviously the foundations will be bigger, but for residential properties they'd be mostly about 1.8 metres. Sorry, I digress. A lot of moisture can be extracted down to 6 metres. It's not the main roots supporting the tree the problem, but it's the fine root hairs, which are the ones which reach out greatest distances from the tree and absorb most of the moisture. Now, these are the ones which can reach down to 6 metres, particularly in dry periods. And in dry periods, oak, poplar and willow are regarded as the worst offenders, so the fine tree roots go down the furthest, in other words. And a householder would need to check that trees are in the zone of influence. So looking at the graphic On the right here, basically if the height from the base of the tree to its top is more than the base of the tree to the wall of the property, then potentially there could be a problem. And trees are only a trigger for subsidence in the area of cohesive, for instance, clay soil. And the other trigger, or the second trigger, 2 out of 3, leaking drains and water mains. Now these cause about 15 to 20% of subsidence claims annually in the UK. Old clay pipes can crack in very cold or very hot weather and leak because they're brittle, and water can often soften the soil, causing the pipe to drop and crack. This, and ironically, this also can let tree root hairs to invade the pipes, leading to blockages and more leaks. So it goes on. Also, water leaking from pipes drains can also wash the soil away, leading to voids being created into which a building can subside. Also, I should mention soakaways. These are now built further away from the property. In the past, they were built closer to the building. I should explain what soakaway is if you're not aware of it. A soakaway is a pit typically, well, it used to be filled with hardcore. Perhaps builders used to call it build over, so basically rubbish left over from the building, bits of brick and hardened cement and stuff. So it was filled with this, it used to be filled with this hardcore, into which rainwater is piped so that it slowly drains into the surrounding area. Now, and I know this because we've had 2 built as part of our extension in the last year, they must be a minimum of 5 meters away from the building. It used to be 3 meters, and you can't use what builders used to call overbuild or just hardcore. It has to be made up of specific material. Now it depends on the local planning authority. Now we've got what I can only describe under the ground as huge milk crates stacked on top of one another side by side high. So the pits they look like they were about 2 meters or 2.5 meters deep. These milk crates, I know they're not milk crates, they look like it, are put in there, and then the part of the rainwater from the roof, in our case, is piped to the soakaways to the front and back. So it used to be 3 meters, used to be filled with all sorts of building rubbish. Now it's a minimum of 5 meters by building regs, and there's a more professional structure to the soakaway build, if that's the right way to put it. Now, if a soakaway isn't the correct distance away from the property, so 5 meters generally now is considered to be acceptable, or if it's of inadequate construction or excavated within the water table, then the rainwater won't effectively discharge away from the house. Now, any chance of water migrating towards the house foundations could be a potential risk, and we would therefore advise that after a period of high rainfall, the performance of soakaways should be visually assessed. So if as we used to get a part of waterlogged ground in the back garden about 3 meters away from the original back wall, where we used to get a puddle which formed, and because we had these extensions and the new regulations were 5 meters away, they were excavated, they were taken out, and they were just filled with old rubbish, and they were dreadful condition, and they just weren't fit for purpose. So that water would have been backfilling towards our property. Fortunately, we had no subsidence, but it can happen. And the third subsidence trigger are man-made causes. Now, there are 3 of these shown on this slide. The first one is removal of support, for instance, retaining walls or foundations leading to a land or building collapse. An example of this would be, now, I live in or near Worthing, down in Sussex on the south coast. Now, years and years ago, probably about 20 or 30 years ago, a tenant rented a basement flat in a row of old, they weren't Victorian, they're older than that, 5 or 6 4-story houses that were all converted into flats, and this person rented the basement flat. And what they decided to do, without permission from the landlord, the freeholder, the managing agent, was to dig down to a sub-level, so 1 level below the basement, because they wanted a sound studio, a recording studio, where they could record music, without disturbing the neighbours, and they'd have good soundproofing. Quite a reasonable, if badly thought out idea. Now, what happened was the whole of the terrace, there must be between 15 and 20 6 or 7-story houses, all converted into flats, that started to lean towards the towards the east. So because this chap started digging out what were the foundations to create this recording studio, the whole of the Bedford Row which is behind the Dome Cinema near Worthing Seafront, started to lean forward. Now, the local council had to come in and put some industrial acros up to support the building, or the whole of the terrace, because the whole of the terrace started to lean forward. And the tenant disappeared pretty quickly. And the council had to shore up, push it up. I don't know what the mechanics of it were, but certainly put all the earth back into the excavated what was going to be a recording studio. So removal of support can cause subsidence. This is a very short version. Ongoing vibrations from nearby industry can cause it. So quarrying, traffic, depending on how it is, or hydraulic fracturing or fracking, as we now know it. Dropping water levels. Now, these could be caused by water extraction, for instance, digging a well, or building operations which affect the local groundwater level by absorbing water from the surrounding soil. Could also be a trigger. So I did say I was going to talk about issues that are similar to subsidence. So we've got heave here. Now, heave is similar to subsidence, and well, it's commonly thought it is subsidence, but it's the opposite. It's the upward movement of ground supporting a building. So let me just find my notes on this. So yeah, it's only cohesive soil, so not the sandy ones. It's caused by removal of trees prior to development. It's a slow process. It can take up to 30 years. And landslip. Now, this normally happens on land where the incline is more than 10%. It's covered by inland only, so it's not covered by in UK insurance policies where it's near the sea, and it's caused by an increase in natural water or leaking drainage. Now, other causes of cracking, these aren't normally covered by an insurance policy. So settlement, so it's the opposite. Thermal movement, I mentioned that before. Lintel failure. Now, years ago, I say years ago, I had lintel failure, so it wasn't that long ago, but probably late 80s, I had a converted flat, and the lintel above the back window was wooden, and that rotted over time. And I started to see some, well, the first thing I noticed was that the double glazed window glass cracked. And I got a surveyor in, and he said, oh, the lintel's gone. And we looked outside, and there was that higgledy-piggledy cracking that you can see in the snippet in the slide there. So what we had to do was not just replace the window, because that's not providing any structural support. We had to acro up, or I say we, a builder had to acro up, or using strong boys, and to hold the gable end up, take the old rotten wooden lintel out, replace it with a catnip, so excuse me, a metal or galvanized support, replace the window, replace a lot of the bricking that was not fit for purpose. So we still get that with lintels that are wood, or even some of them modern ones which aren't fit for purpose, or they're not strong enough to support the load above them, and they fail again. Chemical attack, so this is where if the chimneys aren't lined, so if you have a fire or a wood or solid fuel burner, the reaction between the waste from the fire, so the soot and rainwater, causes the mortar to rot and drop out. So chemical attack, roof spread, that's where the weight of the roof just is too much for the outside water to support. So if you have normally a bricks, a 9-inch cavity wall is a pretty common form of construction in the UK. And if the weight of the roof is too much to be supported by the main skin of wall which supports the roof, which is the outer skin, then the roof can spread, and that can also cause extensive structural damage. So, for instance, these days, if you were to put, for instance, what are they called, the solar panels on the roof, now it would be sensible to get a structural engineer or structural surveyor to make sure that the strength of the roof and the outside wall is enough to support the extra weight that you're putting on. Or if you're changing a roof tile from one roof tile to perhaps a heavier one, again, it would be sensible to get some kind of expert advice on whether the support in the roof and the outside wall is fit for purpose. But so the last one is cavity wall tie failure. So we used to get this in the 80s, where cavity walls were metal, they weren't galvanized, and over time moisture used to collect on the middle tie, which was typically twisted, and cause it to rust, expand, and eventually break, and that would cause the external wall to push away from the internal wall. So a lot of the time, it's a major expense. The wall would have to be taken down and rebuilt. These days, cavity wall ties are made of either galvanized metal, so it doesn't rust, or plastic or resin. So more and more common these days. So unlikely to rust and fail. So I said I would talk about the lender and insurance approach to subsidence in the UK. So in the last 10 years, subsidence has cost the economy a huge amount, 3 billion. 1 in 5 properties are at risk of subsidence in the UK. I think some 6.9 million. And there's been a 50% increase in subsidence across the UK in the 25 years. And the prediction from the BGS, so the British Geological Society, is that this will have about a third increase in subsidence in the UK in the next 10 years. So there are some, what's the lender approach? So what used to be the Council of Mortgage Lenders, but they've been bundled into a finance body called UK Finance. Now, they say that they must carry out the usual, I think they call it the usual and necessary searches appropriate to the property, locality and features. The property must have insurance covering subsidence, heave and landslip, particularly if there's a mortgage involved, and there may be a defect which isn't covered by the lender's valuation report. So we always recommend that buyers shouldn't rely on the lender's valuation report, because that does no more than satisfy the lender, if there is one, that there's suitable security in the property such that if the poor old borrower defaults on the mortgage, then the lender can repossess the property, sell it, and not lose any money. That's all they're interested in, security. So they're particularly risk averse. So it doesn't normally comment on anything that could be of use to the buyer. So we always recommend what we used to call a home buyer's report, the RICS or equivalent expert home buyer's report, which go into a lot more detail, or should it be necessary, a structural engineer's report or similar expert. So the policy content, the insurer approach is the policy content, substance or the standard wording is substance or heave on the site upon which the building stand or landslip. And that policy wording for subsidence is the downward movement of the ground on which the building is founded for a reason unconnected to the loading of the ground from the building. So it's not heave, which we mentioned, which is the loading on the ground of the building. It's the downward movement of the ground, so the forming of a void. And there is a confusion of settlement, so it's the loading of the ground versus subsidence, and there's a bit of case law where the insurers thought they'd draw a distinction between subsidence and settlement. It's Barker versus Lynch, 1990, and the judge stated that subsidence is an ordinary English word, I'm quoting here, when an insurance policy will be read by ordinary people and it must be therefore have an ordinary meaning, and the judge decreed that damage described as settlement due to the building weight was subsidence within the meaning of the policy. I did say I'd talk about these insurers' approach. Now, the insurers' approach policy, the important factor from the policy content from the insurer's point of view is that what is covered and what is not. So there are several exclusions. So the most important of these is every policy contains an excess of usually £1,000. So many claims are settled for this amount or less, and a lot of this, I know you can shop around, it's very easy to shop around for buildings and contents insurance. So subsidence would normally form a part of your buildings insurance, but it's practical to check. But normally when you're shopping around, you find that that you can alter the excess. The higher the excess, the lower the premium, and then vice versa. But the excess for insurance, it's normally a minimum of £1,000. So, as I say, usually claims settle for around this amount. Now, another exclusion is settlement, as I mentioned on the last slide. Cracking causing alterations, repair, demolition. River or coastal erosion is excluded, and defective design or bad workmanship is also excluded as well. Actually, I will mention the claims process here as well. Now, it's estimated that 40 to 60% of claims is reported or rejected as they're not subsidence. So the basic procedure is a long, slow process, and it's as follows. So firstly, an investigation and monitoring of the cracking. This may take 6 to 12 months, measuring the cracking to see if they are continuing to expand, or the cracks are continuing to expand, excuse me. They can commonly use a remote monitoring system connected to the internet that send out data every 8 minutes. They're commonly used. You can repair. There are specific guidelines and building regulations, consent from the local authority that will be required. Although commonly underpinning was carried out in the past, more recent repairs are concentrated on more localized errors using micropiling. And also on completion, the owner should be given a certificate of structural adequacy by an investigator, so a surveyor or chartered engineer. This is a final document. It should be kept carefully and passed on to future owners, and should also be given a completion certificate by the local authorities as well, or a certificate of structural adequacy. So just to summarize, subsidence is equivalent to flooding in terms of numbers in incidents and annual average events. It's just not as exciting, so it's not that newsworthy. The forecast, certainly from the BGS, is for it to increase a third in the next 10 years. And subsidence through soil shrinkage is the largest cause of subsidence, accounting for 75% of incidents in the UK. And there are a number of core causes of subsidence, many of which require a further known trigger. We looked at 3 of those earlier. And the lender's approach is not as developed as insurers, and you need to understand the policy content, definitions, restrictions, and omissions before your client commits to the purchase of a policy that includes it. So I did say I'd have a look at a couple of case studies. The first one is in St Albans. Now, this is a few years ago. This was school, I think. Let me have a look. No, there's the next one. That's in Pinner. So imagine if you woke up. I mean, I always wonder how you feel if you woke up devastated. Obviously, you wake up and there's this hole outside your property. So this was, I think it was the 31st of October, something like 2016, 2017, something like that. So it was fairly recently. And if we look at our old mapping, we can see that the Fontwell Close sinkhole is on the blue, light blue turquoise cross right in the middle of the mapping. And you can see that on our mapping, we have a couple of relatively close purple triangles, which we say are man-made cavities. And when you look at another part of our mapping, our mining and subsidence report, there's some cross-hatching which shows clay bricks and tiles manufacturing right on that sinkhole. So this is some old mapping. We look at some old mapping and some clay pits. Typically, clay pits were associated with brick making in the past, and then you can see clay pits just below it as a brick kiln. Yeah, so there you go. So the clay was mined, the clay was made to make bricks, and it was fired in the kilns, and that's exactly on the Fontwell Close, right on that corner. So a couple of other snippets there. Extremely worrying, not just for the people who live in the adjacent properties or nearby properties, but in the surrounding area as well. So what our mining and subsidence report showed, so actually I've showed a risk view residential report here, which one of the component parts is ground hazards on mining and subsidence. We show here, right on that exact space where the sinkhole occurred, we show some more mining areas. So there you go, 13 meters actually from the property on the corner, not the sinkhole, from the property on the corners. There's some more. There's a lot of mining around here for the clay. 27, so 13 meters, 27, 49, 50. There's an awful lot of mining that's happened here that you may not know about if you hadn't seen the ground stability part of our risk view residential report. Now this one is the local school. This is the school in Pinner. This was really interesting, actually. I saw a documentary on this on the TV the other year. So part of a school playground collapse. Doesn't look that exciting to look at, but the whole school was evacuated, obviously. So there you go, a deep crater opened on the car park after the mine was hidden 65 feet below the buildings was found. So here we go. Again, rather than just show our mining and subsidence report, I've shown it in a report where the ground hazards is a component part of it. So here we show, there you go, a mark information group have identified the following factors that may either affect the stability of the ground at or close to the property, or indicate the property is located within a radon affected area. It goes into a bit more detail. And there's the mapping, there's the school. And there you go again, this is man-made mining cavities. So this is 27, there's quite a few of these. The nearest one is 27 meters away. And there's also, just have a look at below, natural ground stability, built on some clay. So there is potential for shrinking or swelling clay, so subsidence again. So I remember going back to this one, I remember seeing this on a documentary on the TV the other year, and it was really clever. You think, I don't know how they were going to fix it. So they sent some, they got a specialist mining company in to map in 3D all the mine, or as much of the mine as they could underneath the school, and it was a huge labyrinth. So they sent some, it was like a science fiction film. They sent some sonar drones down this gap in the tarmac, and it mapped out this massive labyrinth of mines underneath the school, and it was absolutely huge. I'm surprised that no more damage was caused than just the modest little hole in the car park. And so what they did was they were able to map it in 3D, and they were able to pump concrete into every single part of all of those mines under the school, and eventually reopen the school. So it's eventually a good ending. It's really interesting. But if you didn't buy a landmark report that incorporated mining subsidence, the first you'd know about it, as in real life, was when a hole appeared in the playground. This is up in Ripon. So imagine waking up to this, going out your back door, and this is what's here. So there's quite a few in, annoyingly, frustratingly, in Ripon. Now Ripon is susceptible due to we call them Permian gypsum deposits, which dissolve more quickly than the surrounding limestone. Surrounding limestone. So this Magdalene's Road is the most recent example. It covers, I don't know if we've got an aerial shot of this. It's 20 meters across by 10 meters wide, so that's about 33 feet in old money. 30 feet in old money. Have we got any? Okay, so there's Magdalene's Road. We flagged a risk at the property. We show that there is, what have we got here? Large-scale subsidence, high ground dissolution risk according to the British Geological Society, and there's a potential for compressible ground also from the BGS. So all of this data is in our mining and subsidence reports. So there you go. We get some of it from Peter Brett's Associated, and part of it from the British Geological Society. So that's just for this case study. We get a lot of other information from the Environment Agency. We also get some unique data from OVARP, who are the largest engineering company in the world as well. So this is what our risk view residential report shows. And again, one of the component parts of this 5-in-1 report is ground hazards or mining and stability. And these sinkholes in Ripon were caused by the dissolution underground of, so we said earlier, or I said earlier, that a void is caused by dissolution of ground, causing a property to fall into it. So what happens is a cave is made underground, there's a void, and the weight of the ground above it causes the sinkhole in the little graphics on the left here, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like the one in Ripon. So what do they show? So these show the importance of considering property-specific man-made mining concerns and natural ground stability issues. Why wouldn't you? And we show historic mining. We show specific locations of mining and natural cavities. And there you go. There's the unique OVARP data to Landmark. No one else has this. It's commissioned by the former Department of the Environment, and carried out by the largest engineering company in the world, Ovarics. So this forms this is part. All this data goes into our mining and substance report. If you don't want to buy multiple reports, you can buy our risk view residential report, of which ground hazards, so mining and substance, is a component part. There you go. We say, I mean, obviously you'd expect me to say this, but all of our reports are put together such that the front page is in an easy to interpret at a glance format, not just for the conveyancer, but for your client as well. So I just thought I'd show a quick summary of our mining and subsidence report. So it shows natural and man-made concerns. So there's all sorts of things we have in this report. So all non-coal minerals, shallow and deep, natural brine areas, so there's salt to the layperson, all quarrying, sand, gravel, British Geological, geoshore, natural data, so running sand, landslip to solution, collapsible and compressible ground, shrinking, swelling clay, landfill, infilled and made up ground, unrecorded mine hazards we also included. And there's also, I mean, you would never know, or the layperson would never know, the mining history in the UK. We've mined for all sorts of stuff over hundreds and hundreds of years, and if you think that the mining industry is limited to the coal, mostly up north, and tin mostly in Cornwall, then you're wrong, because we've also got things like slate, lead, gold, even a bit of silver, silica, salt. Didn't think we'd mined for salt in the UK, but we do. Ball clay, copper bolt. We've even got asked. Anyway, there's a long list of mining activity in the UK which we include in our reports. Now, we used to have two reports. Confusingly, one was called the Ground Stability Report, or not confusingly, the title of the report was self-explanatory, but we also had, that's the one to the right, we also had one called Subsidence Risk Rating Postcode Report. So to the layperson, they may find this quite confusing because at face value you think these both do the same thing. But the Ground Stability Report showed the potential for the property to subside based on mining information and geology information, and the Subsidence Risk Rating Report was based on subsidence insurance claims in that postcoded area. So we've made a better report. We've made one report that does both things better. We now call it the Mining and Subsidence Report. We retired the Subsidence Risk Rating Postcode Report. We didn't think it was better. We're as good. We're able to get our hands on better data, and we've made it into one report. So we've put the two reports together. We haven't increased the price of reports till £20, and the insurance claims data we're able to get from Crawford & Co. They're the largest independent claims management company in the world. We used to call them loss adjusters years ago. Apparently they're called independent claims management company. So Crawford's, they're the largest company in the world that deal with this claims data. So we were able to go to the best possible source for this. So the new report is now one instead of two, much better. The end user, it's more information, it's better presented, I think, easy to interpret at a glance. It offers better value for money. If you were to buy the two reports, I think one was £20, one was £15. A lot of people bought both of them. That's £35. Now we've got one report that does more than the combined old reports we kept at £20. Turnaround times very quickly. Sorry, I went through that very quickly. 1 day. So it shows any potential mining hazard of the property. So two parts of this report. The first part is if there are any man-made or natural hazards in the area. There you go, that's the ground stability bit. And the second part is if there have been any insurance claims in the immediate vicinity of your property that are handled by, firstly, the coal authority, and secondly, subsidence doesn't have to be coal related. Of course, it could be any of the other things I talked about earlier. So there's two parts, or three parts of this: ground stability and two parts of the insurance thing. No one else does this. So ground hazards, the first bit. So we have former mining, brine extraction, salt mining, landfill sites, natural ground stability hazards. And then in the second part, insurance, claims made to the coal authority. the claims made at the Coal Authority, and insurance for insurance and insurance, other insurance claims from subsidence at the property. So here you go, what's in the report. So it's a clear front page summary. As I say, all of our reports are built like this, so they're easy to interpret at a glance. We show uniquely real case subsidence insurance claims at or close to the property. And there's a detailed professional opinion and next steps. So that it's not, oh, look, here's something that could cause damage to your property and then run away, run for the hills. It shows detailed next steps that you can do to mitigate the risk, if any. And I did say I'd finish on something called simplifying your search pack. So we do have a mining and subsidence report. So if you order your reports, your search packs through Searches UK, you'll log on to their excellent ordering platform, put the property number or name and postcode in, and it will automatically show what reports you should have. So if there's an alert for ground stability, for instance, the advice would be to order a mining and subsidence report. Simple. So if you don't want to be bothered about multiple reports, then this is the answer. So we know there are multiple issues in conveyancing. So there's guidance from the Law Society on contaminated land that came out in 2001. There's guidance issued from the Law Society on flooding. I think that came out in 2013, was updated in 2016 and 2020. And I think the wording in 2020 is much better. It said you must provide flooding information if appropriate, rather than I think the old wording was you should, and in legal parlance, should means best practice in most cases, and the wording is changed to be easier to follow, I think. But there's nothing on wind farms, solar farms. So if you were this close to a wind turbine, I mean, I think they're absolutely fantastic. Anything renewable has got to be good, but would I like it that close to my property? Probably not, although, that's just my opinion. There's no issues on ground stability, and there's no issues on planning. But if you're a home buyer and a lender, you'd be interested in all of these. From a lender's perspective, any of these could affect the security, and that's what they're interested in. That they're conservative bodies, they don't want to lose money. So if any of these would affect the securities, i.e. the money that they lend to home buyers, then they're going to be concerned. And if you're a home buyer, any of these could affect your use and enjoyment. Contaminated land, if the land's found to be contaminated by the local authority, they'll ask you to pay for it. Sorry, you, the homeowner, to pay for it, even if you haven't caused it. And any of these could, not just contaminated land, but flooding, solar farms, wind farms, ground stability planning can affect your client's use and enjoyment of the property. Planning, slightly different, can be subjective, so I might not like that block of flats being built next door to me, but someone else might not care. However, most people will be upset if a hole in the ground appears outside or near their property. So what is this report? This report is we call it Risk View Residential. It has component parts to it. So the first component part is EnviroSearch. So that's our contaminated land report. It's a full energy and infrastructure report. So that's oil and gas exploration, wind energy, solar energy, other renewable energy plants, HS2, Crossrail 1 and 2. It's a full flood report. It's a full mining and subsidence report. And it also has planning applications out to 750 meters. So we put this together in one easy to interpret report. So it's 5 reports in one, 6, I suppose, if you include radon. Although if you take into account all the types of floods, so coastal rivers, other which will dramatically be dam break, pluvial. You could say it's even more than that, but we'd list flooding as one rather than multiple. So what are the benefits of one report? Well, obviously, you get one report instead of 5. No need for the alert-driven process. So if you order your searches through Search UK, you put the property details in, it will automatically alert you to, for instance, flooding or ground stability, and the advice is to, if there is flood alert, order a flood report. For this ground stability issues, order a ground stability report, so mining and subsidence. So what do you do when you see that? You write to your client saying there's a risk of ground stability. Please can I spend £20, which by the way is in your client account, hopefully, or if it isn't, please can you send me £20? What if they don't reply? What if they do reply and say no? You write to them advising there is a risk, but you decide not to do anything about it. Anyway, there's a lot of manual work around what should be an automated process. There's less to look at because there's less pages in these reports. This risk-free residential is between 9 and 14 pages in total because we only show the risks rather than anything that doesn't affect the property. So there's less to look at, less to print, less to post. I posted a card to my nephew. He was 16 the other day, 70p just for the stamp. So if you're posting multiple documents, multiple pages, it's expensive. You can have one client care letter rather than client care letter wording for multiple reports. And we quite like the online viewer. So there's an online view of this report. You click on the front page of the PDF where it says click here, and it opens up a web page that's bespoke to this property. It shows flooding, energy and infrastructure, planning hazards, all the stuff that you can see in the PDF, but just in a digital format. So I think we set the strapline for this report. It's built for the digital age, and I find it easier to look at, for instance, planning applications on a web page than I do thumbing through multiple pages in a PDF. Now that's my preference, but other people will prefer the PDF. You don't have to access the online viewer. If you're happy with you and your clients are happy with the PDF, absolutely fine. There's no extra cost, by the way, for accessing the online viewer, as it's included in it. And it's a fixed cost, so there's none of this going back to your client asking them for more money. Excuse me. So I said I'd finish in about 45 minutes or half an hour. I've done the continuing competence reference if you need it. It's EGM/LING. If you'd like a free report run on your property, either ask Sam at Searches UK, so Samantha.Manning at searchesuk.co.uk, or email me, philip@landmark.co.uk. That's philip@landmark.co.uk. I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you very much for listening.